Hello and welcome to this special edition of Liberty Nation TV. I'm Lisa K. Donner, editor-in-chief, and joining me today are Liberty Nation's military correspondent, Dave Patterson, and our economic guru, Andrew Moran. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Glad to be with you.
Well, I've titled this Biden's Path to Poverty and War, and I don't think that's an overstatement because the situation developing in Ukraine is unraveling rapidly, and it's going to impact Americans directly. I mean, just a few short years ago, we were energy independent. Now we've got all kinds of things flying around, and it's because of what's going on in Ukraine. But let's start with you, Andrew. How do you think a full Russian invasion of Ukraine, which seems more and more likely by the day, including a missile launch at the capital city, Kiev, how do you think that will directly affect the American consumer?
Oh, well, oil and natural gas would be the biggest factors when you consider it. We look at the numbers. Russia now supplies the U.S. with about 10% of crude oil. 10%, that's not a small amount, especially when you consider now that the United States is a net importer of oil, which is a far cry from what happened a couple of years ago when the U.S. was a net energy exporter. Right now, the U.S. oil market, as well as the global energy markets, they're tight. You have such supply deficits occurring. The United States isn't producing as much as it used to. So if Russia stops shipping oil to the United States, this can have massive consequences with the consumer, particularly at the pump. Right now, a gallon of gasoline is about $3.53 nationwide. In California, it's nearly $5. A Russian invasion of Ukraine, you see dramatic increase in the price of oil and natural gas.
Dave, how vital are our interests in Ukraine, enough to send ground troops, air support, or maybe you can talk me through what Biden has done and where he seems to be misstepping, let's just say.
Well, I think that President Biden has really simply presented the world with a gesture. I mean, the most he sent, he put 8,500 of our airborne forces on heightened alert. He's actually sent around 6,000 troops, and only 1,000 of those troops were simply relocated from Germany to other places. And you have to realize that 6,000 troops, that's the same number as he attempted to salvage the retreat from Afghanistan. So it's not particularly impressive, and certainly probably doesn't impress President Putin.
Andrew, how do you think the issue of the pipeline and, shutting down the pipeline here, and we've got the Nord Stream 1, and then we're talking about the Nord Stream 2, and, is this really going to make it so that it works to the benefit of the environmentalists to say, well, look, fossil fuels are not working. They're not serving us right. We need more wind and solar power.
Well, that's one of the main factors of why there's such an energy crisis all over the world. Has been this transition to green energy. One of the key beneficiaries of this green energy transition has been Russia. Russia continues to produce massive amounts of oil and natural gas and supplies to the rest of the world. When this energy crisis started, Russia was laughing all the way to the bank because all these countries were desperate to import a lot of Russian oil, a lot of Russian natural gas, a lot of Russian coal. And when it comes to the pipeline in the United States, this was such a strategic disaster. Because now, U.S. is now less energy dependent because of all these destruction of the pipeline. Now, Biden will say that, oh, well, I approved more drilling permits on federal land, which is technically true. But if nobody's biting because of the regulatory concerns over Biden's green agenda, then what difference does it make? This is not going to help prices whatsoever. And also, one more thing, Biden says he's going to release more oil from strategic reserves. That didn't do anything in the first place. When there's such a tight global market, releasing 35 million barrels into the economy or into the global energy markets is not going to do anything. Also, it shows how desperate he is of trying to rein in oil prices, that he's negotiating with Iran. Because if he can get a new agreement with Iran can pump about 1 to 2 million barrels per day of oil, which is not going to work again. One more thing, because OPEC wants Iran to join back and follow OPEC's quota system. Dave, so everything is a disaster on the energy front because of Biden's policies.
Yeah, Dave, I think it's easy to be an armchair critic, but what could Biden have maybe done to avoid this situation? Putin was putting the push on. What could he have done to maybe make this a situation that doesn't so poorly impact American consumers? And Do you think he felt the need to publicly rule out fighting the Russians?
Well, I think that, let me answer your second question first. I don't think that he had the support or the confidence of the American people to do that, and particularly not after Afghanistan. But what he could have done is when there were 70,000 troops on Ukraine's border a year ago, and the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, had asked for help and realized what the outcome of these few troops by comparison would be, that the world sort of ignored it. Of course, it was a subject in June at the Putin-Biden summit, but nothing really came of that, the agreement to have more talks. But what President Biden could have done to drive the narrative here would have been to say, look, I see that you have 70,000 troops on the border. We're going to see those 70,000, and we're going to have an exercise in Ukraine, and we'll do something like we did in Reforger back in the Cold War days, which you seem to want to go back to, and we'll put 50,000 troops there in 3 weeks.
So play a little poker. We'll see your 70 and raise you 50.
Well, that's right, and it's so foreign to Biden's way of thinking and his national security team's way of thinking. They approach negotiations by, first of all, we'll give up a key need for our side. Won't you do the same thing, please?
You know, Andrew, I think the American economy is amazingly resilient, and we're dealing with inflation here. The Fed's talking about raising interest rates. One thing that has stayed pretty strong, at least in most red states, is the real estate market. But fossil fuels really drive the economy to a larger extent than I think most people realize. I mean, they make our tractors run, not just our cars. They make our airplanes run. How do you think this is going to all come down, let's say by summer, by June, when people are, heading out for their summer vacations?
Yeah, the thing that the President Biden and his administration are doing is that they're trying to gaslight the public by saying, oh, well, price inflation was easing before this Ukraine crisis. If you look at the January CPI data, everything was coming down, which is complete poppycock because nothing has been easing. Inflation right now, it's across the board. It's everything: oil, shelter, food, whatever the case. So it's not going to do anything whatsoever. Even if that whole situation in Eastern Europe dissipates, oil prices are still going to skyrocket. Why? Because of these tight oil conditions. Supply is not meeting the demand anywhere in the world. And Biden is not going to encourage American oil companies to drill, baby, drill. So you're still going to have these, massive gas prices. You're still going to have, $90 a barrel. JP Morgan said this morning that it's probably going to reach $150 a barrel by the end of the year. So, nothing Biden's doing helping whatsoever. And it's just going to intensify as the year goes by.
Dave, your prediction of how things are going to kind of turn out the next couple of days here?
Well, I think in the next couple of days, Lisa, I think that Putin has to establish and solidify his position in eastern Ukraine. And he also has something else to be thinking about, and that's his relationship with China, which we haven't talked about. And to Andrew's point, and I think this is a complicating factor, Russia supplies north of $23 billion worth of crude oil to China, which is about 15.5% of their total imports. And that's not insignificant. It's not trivial. And so Russia is walking a fine line in terms of geopolitical pressures, both economic and military.
If I may add one point to Dave's comment, is that, Russia recently established a 30-year agreement with China to supply it with oil and gas. In addition, if you look at Russia's reserves, it's remarkable. He has thousands of tons of gold, thousands of barrels of oil. Moscow can survive the calamity unfolding in the short term. Long term, it's anyone's guess.
Well, thank you, Dave Patterson, military affairs correspondent for Liberty Nation. Thanks for joining us. And Andrew Moran, our economic correspondent, who is absolutely brilliant in the economic field. We thank you both for your expertise. And let's hope that, the predictions are wrong. Who knows, though? Thank you for joining us. I'm Lisa K. Donner, editor-in-chief of Liberty Nation. Thank you for joining us. Have a nice day.
We're doing it for real, really real. Liberty Nation.
And Jeff Charles, contributor for LibertyNation.com.
I think we're starting to make an impact. Liberty style, fighting for freedom.
The tracking poll sponsored by Liberty Nation for Thursday.
Mentioned by Dan Bongino, Rasmussen, Jordan Peterson, and
I
others.
can do it again if you want me to.
Cited in Mark Levin's American Marxism.
I think we're starting to make a really big impact. Getting noticed. We're doing it. Rock on. I'm gone.